The IAEA, oh my gosh, you've heard of them so many years ago when they were supposed to be investigating Iraq, Iran, the days of Muhammad al-Baradei, and at that point of time playing a pivotal role in international diplomacy. Now, with the new American president in office, the IAEA has struck a deal with Iran, which will give its inspectors continued access to verify and monitor Iran's nuclear program for the next 3 months. This is a statement that's been put out by the IAEA that they've reached a temporary technical understanding. Now, this is not the same as the 2015, what is now called the Iran nuclear deal, and we don't know whether that comes back into fruition under a Biden administration or not. Certainly, here's what's already happened. We are expecting President Biden to try to pick up the reins of a nuclear deal that was shelved. The situation is not the same. There have been assassinations that have taken place in Iran subsequently, which I don't think the Iranians are going to forgive and forget very, very easily. There has been a dramatic mistaken plane being taken down. Subsequently, in the past few days, the American administration has sort of indicated that they intend to release information that they have of the role of the current incumbent in Saudi Arabia in the death of a particular journalist, Khashoggi. This is suggesting that some things are indeed changing. And now we need to understand what that change is, because in the interim, we saw the Iranian government getting a lot of financial support coming in from China, a lot of efforts being made by Russia. If a reset is to happen, then how does that impact us? Because for the first time, a few months ago, did we actually change our position? Not completely, but we did change our position on the oil that we have so far stuck our guns to, that we procure out of Iran. Let me open up this conversation. Dr.Waiel is with us, Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee is with us, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor joining us out of Washington, and Surajit Dasgupta is joining us as well. Dr. Waiel, if I can begin with you, what do you make of this, sir? What is this trying to put into place, this deal with the IAEA?
I think it's very clear indication that the Biden administration is planning, a coup inside the Middle East and trying to de-escalate the tension. And that was clearly between the trilateral meeting with Germany, France, and UK and the United States, that it's a time for de-escalation of the tension. So therefore, the main two countries which is causing the tension and changing the American foreign policy during Trump, it was the Saudi Arabia and Israel. So if now he's thinking that Mohammed bin Salman is involved in the killing of Khashoggi, then Mohammed bin Salman days are counted because he's speaking to the father, he's not recognizing even the crown prince. And secondly, the Netanyahu has been very much undiplomatic in his dealing with the Democratic, especially during Obama time, where he had, almost humiliated the former American president, and the Trump administration gave him the upper hand where he can dictate the American policy in the region. And that's what happened now, where Biden has been looking into a way out of solving the crisis with Iran by a face-saving formula. Because if we look at Biden at this stage, how he has been coming back into most of the treaties that Trump has washed his hand out of it, he's coming back. The simple answer to your question is, if the American have already, Biden is coming back to all to all these treaties, why can't he do the same with the Iran? If they have already themselves who signed the deal. So I think it's a ball in the American court.
Okay, how much of the complication has made this untenable after the assassinations that have taken place? Has that made it too toxic an atmosphere, or can you hope within the past 4 years that Biden can do what Obama wanted to do, was to have a rapprochement with Iran?
I think most of the assassination American are only informed about it. It is not done. It is covert operation done by the Mossad, done by agents would have been supported by and Iranian having enough information in this regard. So the killing of scientists and all, it has been on for years. Whoever is involved with it, and I think that's always been happening. So I don't see much of a changing on the ground. The worries of the United States is not that the Iranian have the capability of making a nuclear bomb, but it's the technology they are having it. That's what made
Let me just. Okay. Forgive me. I think we just. Let me take the opportunity of getting an Ambassador Mukherjee. Yeah, Surajit, if you can hear us, I'm just going to put you on mute for a second. I think there's some conversation that's going on there. Ambassador Mukherjee, what do you make of all of this? And more importantly, if this is the first step in reopening conversations with Iran and coming to some sort of agreement on a nuclear weapons program, it's going to be easier said than done. How does then that change our positioning? Do we then find it easier to work with Iran on oil and other things?
Definitely, Rishabh. I think this so-called technical announcement of the IAEA is actually very significant, because what the IAEA has done is that it has helped to develop a face-saving mode for the Americans, as well as for the Iranians for that matter, to facilitate a process by which United States can rejoin the nuclear deal. Because Iran has correctly pointed out that there is a deal, and that in that deal, United States was a party to the deal. It was the United States that left the deal. The other parties never left the deal. After that, subsequently, the Iranians decided, in order to put pressure on the West, to go in for a kind of gradual escalation of their nuclear, I won't call it weapons program, but a nuclear program. Now, what has happened is that since the IAEA inspectors, with a technical footnote, so to speak, have been allowed by Iran to continue for 3 months, in this 3 months, I'm sure you will see a lot of background activity, Rishabh, and there will be a process by which there will be a facilitation for the United States to join. I would agree that the assassinations that have taken place are part of covert operations, and the Iranians always take revenge in their own way, and they don't link it, because these are very pragmatic and clever people. They don't link it directly with a deal that is very important to them.
Okay.
This deal is also important to us because if the sanctions are lifted, then we would be in a process to go back to our old business relationship with Iran. You were talking about the fact that we had made a change. We were forced to do so because otherwise we would have been in contravention of US law, and we would have then had further problems with regard to other
sanctions being put on Indian companies trading in Iran, US sanctions, and then creates a complication. Surajit, how do we clinically see this? Because this is a quagmire. On the one hand, you have the Chinese who are investing heavily into Iran now, providing them with financial bailouts. At the same time, you have the Pakistanis who are terrorizing Iran because of a Shia-Sunni conflict. Then you have a Turkey-Pakistan alliance that is splitting the OIC. Amid this entire quagmire, if Biden makes an outreach towards Tehran, how does it make a difference to us? Surajit, just unmute yourself, please. Surajit, just unmute yourself as you start. Yeah, go ahead.
Am I audible now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. From the Indian perspective, it's a very tricky situation. On the one hand, if the sanctions on Iran are lifted, it will benefit India, especially in the trade that we want to do via the Chabahar route. On the other, Joe Biden or the entire democratic dispensation has always been sympathetic to Pakistan. So I fear a rehyphenation of India-Pakistan policy as far as the US is concerned. So we have to keep our finger crossed on this. We couldn't say how much beneficial it would be for India.
Surajit Dasgupta, what do we then do immediately, given the things that, Afghanistan, there's X we can do, but we can't put boots on the ground. In Iran, there's X we can do, but then there's much that we can't. What do we now need to get corrected? You mentioned Chabahar. A few months ago, we were discussing how that port project is going off very slowly. As we speak, the road that links Iran, Afghanistan, the road that we built, India built, we saw 500, tankers carrying petrol that mysteriously blew up between Afghanistan and Iran. So, in the Pakistani context, what can we do to make things better for ourselves, strategic position better for ourselves in Iran?
I think that the Narendra Modi government is already working on it, because if you look at our Prime Minister's support for Donald Trump during the campaign, and immediately after that, following the riot at the Capitol Hill, I would say he bent over backward to be on the side of would be coming in the US. That is one part of it. The other part of it is, trying to, make Iran realize that they have a friend here in India, and if they are trying to get into some kind of an Islamic brotherhood, which they often do, forgetting the good ties they have with India, will not work. So remember one thing, the US policy is very consistent through the Democrat and Republican governments. So there is not going to be a complete U-turn from Donald Trump's policies. Iran will always be a suspect in American eyes. Even then, if at least the extreme sanctions are lifted, then I think
so because at the same time we're dealing with the irony, Surajit, let me get Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor into this. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, here we are as the FATF plenary session is going on as we speak, right? And they have to decide on Pakistan, grey list, black list, no list, whatnot.
Right.
The only countries who have ever faced the FATF blacklist are North Korea and Iran. Now, we can't seem to convince the Americans or other world powers that Pakistan belongs on the blacklist, but they keep Iran there. What is that telling us? Is the new world about Pakistan or being the pariah, or Iran being the pariah?
Well, I think Surajit.
Take that, Ambassador Kapoor, take that.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, so I see the whole situation as quite complicated, in the sense that if we keep out Pakistan for a minute from this discussion, just for a minute, we can come back to that later. Focusing on Iran itself, the three major Muslim countries in the world today, which are trying to gain a lot of mind space and impact and visibility and footprints, are Turkey, Saudi, and Iran. Now, and each is competing with the other also. It is not that they are supporting one or the other. So there are a lot of countries supporting, either Iran or Saudi Arabia or Turkey. Now, in this complex mix, you have the JCPOA, which is made of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, plus Germany, plus the EU. Now, when you say permanent members, you already have China and Russia, who have their own vested interests to support Iran. So how far this whole exercise will go successfully is a very, very big question mark in my mind. And with the support that Iran has given to, terrorism globally and in the region, that is something which is not going away in a hurry. Now, for India, we have not received much support from Iran in the United Nations on issues which have been important to us. So for us to go out on a limb to give any assurance to Iran that we will be supportive of them, I don't think is required or called for at all at this point of time. And we have to see if we are being able at some stage, suppose, because with India's increasing global footprint, what are we to aspire for? Oil deals and all that are fine, but that is not the main life and existence of India. What we have to look for is a more active global role. So if there is a JCPOA 2, in that, how does India participate more actively to see what is the best way to move ahead? Now for Biden, it's a very confusing scenario, because on the one hand, you have the Jews, Israelis, and their antipathy towards Iran. And that is a constant source, of sort of bickering, constant source of...
but it's more than just bickering.
Whatever, disruptions in the world geopolitical
you're being
stage.
literally diplomatic on that. It's more than just that, of course. But
So that is another angle which is also a very important angle at play. Now, our relations with Israel have increased and improved very, very significantly over the last couple of decades. So have a lot of other Islamic countries now opened up.
Now opened up. The question, of course, remains is whether that's happening under US direction or that's happening because some general rapprochement is taking place. It is
Well,
currently a
US
very
and Saudi, yeah, and other
it's a very
nations
complicated
also.
place because then the
Okay.
Saudis are fighting a war in Yemen, which Biden says must stop. The troops that the Saudis are putting forth are Pakistani. It's a very, very complicated thing. So let me ask a straight question then to Dr. Waiel. Dr. Waiel, is it in the interest of Iran to continue to leverage its position by pursuing a nuclear program, perhaps even a dubious nuclear weapon program?
Look, everybody agrees, even the IEA, even the scientists, even the European agree that the Iranian deal with them is actually tied in Iranian hand, and there is no question of a nuclear bomb by the Iranian under such kind of a deal. So that it is the time for the American to recognize and realize that coming back to the deal will only click that Iran will never have the bomb. Secondly, if you apply the maximum pressure in Iran like you are trying to do what you have done in North Korea, remember that the mistrust of the American administration, whether it's in Iraq, whether it is in Libya, whether it is in North Korea, nobody going to trust the American anymore if you are pulling out of an international deal. Thirdly, which is most important, if you look at the commonality between the United States and Iran, they have so much in common to stabilize the West Asian affairs rather than having conflicting reports. But the Americans never follow their own interest in the region. They always follows what Israel dominance in that part of the world has to go. Having said that, you remember, Rishabh, also the events, which diplomatic events are taking place ever since Biden has come. The American talking to the Iranian, easing sanction on the movement of the Iranian in the United Nations headquarters. And now they're saying they're going to remove the sanction, which is a foregone conclusion now. All these steps are going in the right direction. And I think India's position should be vindicated, that Indian national interest should be put as a priority, because no one can ignore the geopolitical importance of Iran, whether it is for the oil or whether for the Trans-Asia in Europe pipelines where you need. So to have a geopolitically neighboring, strong neighbor next to you without a nuclear bomb, and you are able to safeguard your own interest, I think that's what India should be the top priority.
Well, in that regard, Surajit Dasgupta, how do we pursue a healthy, happy, engaged relationship with Israel, which we have several common interests with, while at the same time producing a healthy, happy relationship with Iran? Is it a dichotomy too far? We've done it in the past.
No, first and foremost, I think that the increasing importance that the world accords to India for the past 20-25 years is because of the strong economic power also that India has emerged into, which in turn has turned it into a world power. So our first focus should be ourselves. Once we are a power to reckon with, which we already are, and we have to build on that, then of course every power, the near ones as well as those far away across the Pacific Ocean, will have to take our views into consideration. I think this trade with Iran through Chabahar and other places in the Middle East and Africa through that port, these talks have been going on for far too long without materializing. So there should be some activity on that front, some progress on that front. At the same time, we have to communicate to the United States that any high-handed behavior does not merely affect America's relations with that particular country.
Yes, so we should have a clear strategic interest. Purchasing oil in rupees from Iran, clear interest, Indian interest. Opening up Chabahar, clear Indian interest. And that should be very, very clear on. I'll leave the last word with Ambassador Mukherjee.
America too is keen on being a friend of India. It cannot ride roughshod on us.
Okay, is there any cause? Is there any cause for the Americans, Ambassador Mukherjee, for some reason to give greater strategic importance to Pakistan than they do to Iran? I've never been able to figure this out, but that's what the truism has been for the past couple of decades.
In fact, I would like to state clearly that there is a all-party consensus within the United States, regardless of which party they are in and who is the US president, on the importance of the strategic partnership for India in the New World Order that includes the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. Under those circumstances, there's no question of India being used, I think the word used was rehyphenation. That finished long time ago. The US-India strategic partnership has gone way past that hyphenation stage, and it's not going to come back. Now, as far as Pakistan and Iran are concerned, the Americans are worried about Iran. That concern is not going to go away. I would agree with the panelists who said that. If there is a limited understanding and the nuclear deal is revived, that would be very good for international peace and security and the Middle East, and for India, because we could go back to buying oil from Iran, which is highly advantageous to us. But having said that, as far as Pakistan is concerned, there are huge American concerns with regard to Pakistan, and that's not going away anywhere, regardless of what the state of play in the Middle East is or what the state of play with Iran is. Pakistan is a big worry for the Americans. It's an unstable country. It has nuclear weapons. It could fall apart, and there are separatist states within Pakistan. So I don't see that we can really go back to worrying about whether we should be
I've run out of time. Here's a
isolated.
reality check for people watching this broadcast, many of whom will be in India, and there'll be others watching us on various platforms abroad.
Yeah.
In the case of Iran, the biggest issue that America can have had with Iran was a particular role that they could have played in Iraq, and many say have already played in Iraq. Beyond that, all the sanctions that have been put on Iran have been put on people who belong to the Revolutionary Guard. All of these sanctions, including putting a blacklist on the FATF, have happened to a country that you can accuse of terror financing, but has no comparison even in allegations to what Pakistan has done. You accuse of trying to build a bomb. Well, where did those parts and designs for the bomb, where they were coming from? They were coming from AQ Khan, they were coming from Pakistan. The Pakistanis went ahead and built the bomb and faced sanctions no longer than the same sanctions applied to India. Now, the dichotomy of this has gotten too amazing, that you can have sanctions against Iran, sanctions against the Iranian leadership, against members of the Iranian military, but have no sanctions against the Pakistani military. It's too difficult to comprehend, and perhaps a bit of American policy needs to understand whether Iran is the enemy or Pakistan is the enemy. They seem a bit confused. I'll leave it there, gentlemen, and Ambassador Mukherjee, thank you very much for having this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.